The Last of Us has arrived, and it's more terrifying than you think. When you hear the word fungus, your mind conjures up images of mushrooms, molds, or perhaps athlete's foot. But did you know that there are species of fungi out there that turn ants into zombies? These horrifying parasites are known as cordyceps. Their spores enter their victims and set up shop in immediately some of the most gruesome species, turning their hosts into real-life versions of the infected from the game. But how does this parasite take over its host's mind completely? How do they control their every move and make them act natural so as not to raise suspicion from other ants in the colony? And is there any way for humans to defend themselves against this terrifying fungus if it were to ever reach our shores? Now let's get back to the terrifying world of the cordyceps. The first thing you should know about this deadly parasite is that there are hundreds of different species, all of which are terrifying in their own right. However, we will be focusing on the species known as Cordyceps militaris, as it is one of the most deadly and well-studied. The life cycle of this terrifying fungus begins when an infected ant, now a fully controlled puppet of the parasite, leaves the colony in search of water. As it ventures further and further away from the safety of its nest, the cordyceps slowly begins to take over its mind. It compels the ant to act natural, tricking its colony mates into thinking everything's all right. Once the ant is far enough away from its colony, the corpus then compels it to begin the final stage of its life cycle. The infected ant climbs up a leaf or blade of grass and gives the north side of it a bite, locking its jaw in a death grip. Here it waits as the fungus grows a small fruiting body out of the back of the dead insect's head. This structure is what allows the corpus to spread its spores and infect more ants, starting the cycle all over again. In some cases, the corpus can even control the dead ants' abdomens, making it appear as if it is alive and well, still tricking its colony mates into thinking everything is okay. Other species of corpus are even more sinister, with some turning their victims into what is known as fruiting bodies. Once the fungus has taken over the entire body of its host, the corpus then instructs the ants' colony mates to bring back food to the dead ants, essentially turning them into a farm for the fungus. This is done through a process known as cinema formation, where the fungus instructs the dead ants to regurgitate some of their digestive juices onto the ground. The corpus then uses these juices to help grow new fruiting bodies, allowing it to spread even further and infect more ants. If this all sounds terrifying to you, that's because it is. But it gets even worse. One of the worst parts about this parasite is that it doesn't just infect ants. In fact, there are species of cordyceps that can infect a variety of insects, including bees, termites, and even cockroaches. There have also been cases of cordyceps infecting and killing spiders, which is especially terrifying considering the fact that spiders are predators. As if this wasn't bad enough, cordyceps can also infect other larger animals, including rats, mice, and even birds. And while it may not be able to control these animals like it can smaller insects, the corpus can still kill them and use their bodies to spread its spores even further. But how exactly does the corpus control the minds of its insect victims? Well, that's not entirely clear, but it is believed that the fungus releases chemicals that allow it to take over the nervous system of its host. This is similar to how the brain-controlling fungus works in the game, except in real life. The corpus doesn't have the ability to turn humans into zombies. However, that doesn't mean that we are safe from this deadly parasite. In fact, there have been cases of corpus infections in humans, although thankfully none of them have been fatal. Symptoms of corpus infection in humans include fever, weakness, and even seizures. And while these symptoms may seem mild compared to what we see in the game, it is important to remember that humans have never been turned into fruiting bodies like the infected in the game. So what would happen to a human if they were to become a fruiting body for the cordyceps? Well, that's where things start to get really gruesome. The cortex would likely start to take over the human's nervous system, controlling their every move just like it does in its insect victims. It would then instruct the person to go somewhere secluded where they would eventually die. Once the corpus had taken over the entire body, it would start to grow fruiting bodies all over the corpse, turning it into what is essentially a giant mushroom. These mushrooms would then start to release spores, infecting anyone who came too close. It sounds like something straight out of a horror movie, but unfortunately it is very possible that this could happen in real life. So what can we do to protect ourselves from this terrifying parasite? Well, the good news is that there is a way to defend ourselves against the corpus, although it is not easy. The key is to act quickly. If someone is showing signs of infection, they need to be isolated immediately. Otherwise, the spores will have a chance to spread and infect others. The infected person will also need to be treated with a powerful antifungal medication, such as amphotericin B or itraconazole. This is not only to kill the fungus, but also to prevent it from taking over the person's nervous system. Unfortunately, there have been cases of the cortex developing resistance to these medications, making treatment difficult. In these cases, a combination of antifungal medications may be necessary to kill the fungus. And even then, there is no guarantee that it will work. So what would happen if the cortex were to somehow become resistant to all of our current antifungal medications? Well, that's a scary thought, but it is one that we need to be prepared for. Fungi are constantly evolving, and it is only a matter of time before they develop resistance to our current ways of fighting them. When this happens, we will need to develop new and innovative ways to combat them. One potential solution is to develop a vaccine against the cortex. This would not only help to prevent people from becoming infected in the first place, but it could also help to reduce the severity of symptoms in those who are already infected. Another potential solution is to develop a medication that targets the corpus's ability to control the minds of its victims. If we can find a way to disrupt this process, it could potentially save countless lives. As you can see, the cortex is a terrifying parasite that should not be taken lightly. While it may not be able to turn humans into zombies like we see in the game, it is still a very real threat that we need to be aware of. By understanding how the corpus works and how to treat it, we can help to prevent it from spreading and causing harm. But let's hope it never reaches our shores. Now watch what happens to your body after you die. Or check out. What if a meteor made you rich?